There is a moment in the history of human consciousness when a man stands up and I will descend, not to conquer, not to destroy, not to impose his will on, but to explore, to understand, to reveal that which has remained hidden since the beginning of time. Carl Jung was that man, and when he made that choice, when he decided to descend into the depths of the human unconscious, he did not know that he would never fully return to the surface. Because once you see what Jung saw, once you understand what he understood, you can no longer live, and you become a bearer of knowledge that transforms you, that isolates you, that places you in a place between two worlds. Jung was no ordinary psychologist. He wasn't a scientist, content with formulas, equations, and theories that fit perfectly into textbooks. He was something far rarer, far more dangerous. He was an initiate, a man who understood something that few dare to ignore, that few can articulate, that few have the courage to investigate to its ultimate consequences. Jung realized that true science doesn't only study what is outside of us. It isn't limited to the material world that we can touch, measure, and quantify. True science, the science that matters, the science that transforms, studies what dwells in the infinite depths of soul. And this is a science that has no laboratory, no instruments, no established protocols. This is a science that requires courage, that requires sacrifice, that requires a willingness to lose everything you believed in, discover what is truly true. While his contemporaries, including Sigmund Freud himself, with whom Jung worked and later parted ways, mapped personal traumas and childhood wounds, Jung looked at something much older, much vaster, much more sacred. He realized that within each human being there is not just a personal unconscious, that repository of forgotten memories, repressed desires, and traumas that shaped who you are. There is something greater. There is something that transcends you as an individual. There is a collective unconscious, a psychic ocean that unites all of humanity, that transcends cultures, eras, geographies, and languages. A shared reservoir of human experience that exists in a state of eternal potentiality, waiting to be accessed, waiting to be understood, waiting to be integrated in. But how do you discover something that no one before discovered? How do you study something that cannot be seen, touched, or measured by conventional scientific methods? Jung faced this question every day of his professional life, and his answer was revolutionary. He said, "You study through symbols. You study through myths. You study through dreams. You study through alchemy, astrology, ancient religions, indigenous cultures, everything that modern science had dismissed as superstition and ignorance." Because Jung understood that these systems were not products of ignorance. They were languages, codes through which the collective unconscious communicated with human consciousness. They were maps of the psyche. And if you knew how to read these maps, if you knew how to interpret these symbols, you could navigate the depths of the unconscious with the same precision with which a cartographer navigates an unknown continent. Jung knew that this discovery carried immense weight, because when you understand that a collective unconscious exists, when you realize that within you dwell forces that are not your own, that are shared by all of humanity, ancestral, primitive, wild, you face a truth that challenges everything we believe about freedom, a voice, about free will, about who we really are. You face the disturbing possibility that you are not as free as you think. You are not as unique as you believe. That your decisions, your behaviors, your deepest desires may be orchestrated by patterns you inherited from the collective unconscious. Patterns that were engraved in the psychic DNA of humanity thousands of years ago. Patterns you never chose, may never be able to completely escape. And it was at this point, on this sacred threshold between the known and the unknown, that Jung made his most courageous choice. He decided to descend. He entered the caverns of the human psyche, armed only with his intelligence, his intuition, and a courage bordering on desperation. He allowed himself to be vulnerable. He allowed himself to question everything he had believed. He allowed himself to explore territories that most scientists of his time considered outside the bounds of legitimate investigation. And during this descent, during this exploration of the depths, Jung found something that would forever change not only his understanding of psychology, but all of humanity's understanding of self. Because what Jung found in those caves wasn't just academic knowledge, wasn't just an interesting theory that could be published in scientific journals and debated at conferences. It was a truth so fundamental, so transformative, and so dangerous that he would spend the rest of his life trying to communicate, fully revealing secret. It was a truth that, if fully revealed, if truly understood by humanity, would forever change how we relate to each other, how we build our societies, how we understand ourselves. And this secret, this knowledge that Jung guarded so carefully that he left scattered in fragments throughout his writings, hoping that future generations gather these pieces, finally understand it, is exactly what we discover But first, you need to understand how Jung got there. You need to understand the journey that took him from the depths of the personal unconscious to the infinite ocean of the collective unconscious. You need to follow in his footsteps through the caverns of the human psyche, because only then will you be able to truly understand what he understood and why he chose to guard this truth. So, have you ever woken up from a dream so vivid, so real, that it took you a few minutes to realize? Have you ever felt that inexplicable sensation of déjà vu, as if you had already lived that exact moment before in a place you've never visited with people you've never met? Have you ever encountered a symbol, an image, a pattern that touched something deep, something you can't rationally explain, but that, absolute certainty means something important? These moments are not accidents. These moments are not coincidences. These moments are doorways. They are portals through which you are touching something much greater than yourself. Something that exists far beyond the limits of your individual mind. Carl Jung spent his entire life mapping these doorways, understanding how they work, revealing where they lead. Jung was not a man who believed in boundaries, while the science of his time drew rigid lines, insurmountable walls between the conscious and the unconscious, between the rational and the irrational, between psychology and mysticism, between science and spirituality. Jung erased them. He understood, through an intuition bordering on direct knowledge, that these divisions were artificial, that they were constructions of the modern Western mind that did not reflect the true reality of the human psyche. Because the human psyche is not an isolated fortress, it is not a closed machine that functions independently of the rest of reality. The psyche is an open temple. It is a sacred space through which dimensions that transcend the individual can flow freely. And it was in this understanding that Jung developed his most revolutionary, the concept that would forever separate him from colleagues, the concept that would make him simultaneously famous and suspect, the collective unconscious. Imagine there is a psychic reservoir shared by all of humanity. It's not a physical place. It's not something you can point to on a map or locate in an atlas. It's a dimension of psychic reality that exists parallel to your individual consciousness, an ocean of psychic potential that permeates all of human existence. In this ocean dwells everything that humanity has ever experienced. All the joys your ancestors felt, all the pain they endured, all the fears they faced, all the desires they pursued, all the dreams they had, all the symbols, all the myths they told. All of this exists in a state of eternal potentiality, waiting to be accessed, waiting to be recognized, waiting to be integrated individual. Jung realized that when you dream, you are touching the ocean. When you experience synchronicities, you are accessing your path. When you feel that inexplicable sense of recognition upon encountering an ancient symbol, you're having a direct encounter with the collective unconscious. But how did Jung know this? How did he arrive at this conclusion that defied all the scientific logic of his time? The answer lies in his unique methodology, in his willingness to explore territories that no psychologist had explored. Jung spent decades studying the mythologies of cultures that had never had contact with each other. He studied the myths of the ancient Egyptians, Greeks, the Hindus, the indigenous peoples of the Americas, the Australian Aborigines, and what he found was disturbing. It was impossible. It was inexplicable by conventional logic. He found the same stories, the same characters, the same archetypal conflicts repeating themselves across cultures separated by thousands of years, without any possibility of contact. Or the hero who faces the dragon, the sage who seeks the ultimate truth, the great mother who nourishes and devours simultaneously, the trickster who defies norms and expectations. These patterns appeared everywhere, the same, always recognizable, always carrying the same profound psychological meaning. Jung also studied his patients' dreams. Day after day, session after session, he listened to people describing their deepest dreams, their most terrifying nightmares, their strangest nocturnal visions. And again, he found the same patterns, same symbols, the same narrative structures. People who had never read classical mythology dreamed of dragons and heroes. People who had never studied alchemy dreamed of transformations and people from different cultures, different eras, different social contexts dreamed of the same archetypes, expressed in slightly different ways, but fundamentally identical. Jung understood that this could not be coincidence. This could not be a product of individual imagination. This had to be something shared, something universal. Something that existed beyond the individual, that transcended personal experience, that was common to all humanity. These patterns, which Jung called archetypes, were not mere products of human imagination. They were not symbols that cultures had invented independently. They were expressions of fundamental psychic patterns that inhabit the collective conscious, patterns that manifest themselves through every culture, every religion, every symbolic system that humanity has created. They were the language through which the collective unconscious communicates. They were the alphabets through which deep psychic reality attempts to make itself known to our consciousness. And Jung understood that these patterns were not accidental. They were necessary. They were vital. because they revealed the fundamental structure of the human psyche, the way we're all connected through an invisible golden chain that unites the first human being who walked on Earth to the last who will walk on it. But here is the point that Jung rarely fully revealed, the secret that haunted him night after night. These patterns are not merely historical or cultural, they are alive. They are real psychic forces that dwell within each of us at this very moment. They are not sleeping. They are not inactive. They are constantly in motion, constantly influencing you, constantly shaping your decisions, your emotions, your behaviors. Jung realized that most people live under the sway of these archetypes without ever realizing. They believe they're making free choices, but in reality, they are being orchestrated by patterns that were inscribed in humanity's psychic DNA thousands of years ago. They believe they are masters of their own lives, but in reality, they are being danced to by forces they do not understand, cannot control. And this was the truth that terrified Jung. This was the understanding that kept him awake at night, because he knew that if this truth were fully revealed, if people truly understood that they are being controlled by forces that are not their own, forces shared by all of humanity, forces that are ancestral and primal, it would change everything. It would change how people understand themselves. It would change how they live their life. And that is why Jung guarded this knowledge with extreme care, leaving only clues, only fragments, hoping that one day, when humanity was ready, someone could put these pieces together and finally understand the complete truth. Carl Jung did not invent the archetypes. This is a crucial distinction that permeates his entire philosophy, his entire worldview, his entire approach to human psychology. Jung did not invent the archetypes because they cannot be invented. They exist. They have always existed. They will exist as long as humanity exists. What Jung did was discover them, reveal them, map them with the precision of an explorer who finally finds a land that has always been there, but that no one had recognized before. This is a fundamental difference that separates Jung from almost all other thinkers of his time. Jung was a man who believed that truth is not created. Truth is revealed. There is an objective psychic reality as real as the physical world, as concrete as the mountains and the oceans. And our task as conscious beings is to explore this reality, map it, understand it, learn to navigate its mysteries. For Jung, archetypes were the fundamental structures of psychic reality. They were the primordial patterns through which the human psyche organizes itself, expresses itself, and manifests itself in the world. Think of archetypes as the strings of a cosmic harp. Each string has its own vibration, its own frequency, its own profound meaning. Each string, when played, resonates through the collective unconscious, creating waves of meaning that propagate throughout humanity. The hero is the string that vibrates with courage, with the will to fight, with the impulse to conquer and transform. It is the force within you that wants to rise up, that wants to face the dragons, wants to prove its worth to the world. The shadow is the string that vibrates with everything you reject, everything you deny, everything you fear in yourself. It is the force that contains your anger, your sexuality, your ambition, your capacity for cruelty. The sage is the string that seeks understanding, that desires to know the ultimate truth, that aspires to enlightenment and absolute knowledge. And the lover is the rope that seeks connection, desires to be seen, that yearns for intimacy and union with another being. But here's the question no one dared ask Jung. If these archetypes are so powerful, if they truly control our lives as you suggest, how is it possible that most people have never heard of them? How is it possible that people live entire lives without ever recognizing this within themselves? Jung's answer was unsettling. He said that most people live their entire lives being puppets of their own unconscious archetype. They never learn to play the orchestra of their own psyche consciously. They remain trapped in a repetitive pattern, playing the same notes over and over again, while the other strings remain silent, dormant, neglected. And when a string is not played, when an archetype is not integrated, it doesn't disappear. It becomes wild. It becomes the shadow. It emerges in destructive forms, in compulsive behaviors and patterns we repeat without understanding why. Jung saw this in his consulting rooms every day. He saw women who sabotaged their own success because the hero archetype within them had been repressed. They had been told it wasn't appropriate for a woman to be strong, ambitious, or a warrior. These women came to Jung depressed, anxious, not understanding why they sabotaged romance so close to perfection. They didn't know they were being controlled by an archetypal pattern that had been buried deep. He saw men who couldn't connect emotionally with it, who lived lives of isolation and cold, because the lover archetype within them had been castrated by culture, education, and the need to appear strong and invulnerable. These men came to Jung feeling empty, disconnected, unable to love or be loved, without understanding that they were being controlled by an archetypal repression that had been imposed on them since childhood. Have you ever noticed certain patterns you constantly repeat in your life? relationships that begin and end the same way, work situations that always unfold similarly, conflicts with different people that seem to be slightly modified versions of the same conflict. These are not accidents. These are not just unfortunate coincidences. These are the archetypes in action. These are the primordial patterns that inhabit your collective unconscious, which you inherited from your ancestors, which are engraved in the psychic DNA of humanity. And as long as you don't recognize these patterns, as long as you don't become aware of these forces, they will continue to control you. They will continue to orchestrate your life. They will continue to make you make decisions that you believe are yours, but which are actually determined by forces much greater than yourself. Jung understood something that most psychologists had never dared to say aloud. He understood that each human being is a complete orchestra, playing all the archetypes simultaneously. You contain the hero and the sage, the lover and the shadow, the great mother and the trickster, the magician and the innocent. They all live within you. They all want to be expressed. They all have something important to contribute to your life. But most of us never learn to play this orchestra consciously. We get stuck in a repetitive pattern, playing the same strings over and over again. Others remain. And when a string is not played for a long time, it doesn't just be silent. It becomes resentful. It becomes the shadow that emerges in destructive forms, in behaviors that harm us, patterns that we repeat without understanding why. And here is the secret that Jung guarded most carefully. When you truly know your archetypes, when you truly understand the forces that dwell within you, you gain something far more valuable than freedom. You gain the power to choose. Because once you recognize a pattern, once you become aware of a force that was operating unconsciously, that force loses its power over you. You cease to be a puppet being danced by patterns you don't understand. You become a conscious conductor, deliberately playing every string of your psychic orchestra. But this power, this freedom, this mastery over your own psyche comes at a price. And that price is responsibility. It is the need to confront the part of yourself you fear. It is the need to integrate your own shadow. If the archetypes are the strings of a cosmic harp, then the shadow is the silence that exists between the notes. It is everything that is played. It is everything that is acted. It is everything that is denied. Carl Jung understood something that most psychologists of his time did not want to admit. The shadow is not a separate entity. It is not a demon that dwells outside of us. It is not an external force that attacks us. The shadow is ourselves. It is the part of us that we do not want to see. It is the part of us that we do not want to. It is the part of us that we do not want to integrate. Part 4. The shadow. The black mirror. If the archetypes are the strings of a cosmic harp, then the shadow is the silence that exists between. It is everything that is not laid. It is everything that is rejected. It is everything that is denied. Carl Jung understood something that most psychologists of his time could not even imagine. The shadow is not a separate entity. It is not a demon that dwells outside of us. It is not an external force that attacks us from the outside. The shadow is ourselves. It is the part of us that we do not want to see. It is the part of us that we do not want to. It is the part of us that we do not want to integrate into a conscious image of who. And the stronger our denial, the more violent our rejection, the more powerful the shadow becomes. Because the energy you invest in denying something does not disappear. It accumulates. It intensifies. It becomes increasingly wild, increasingly destructive, increasingly determined to emerge and make itself known. Jung understood that there is a personal shadow, the one you create throughout your life, through your choices, your traumas, your repressions. But there is also a collective shadow, a darkness shared by all humanity, a primitive and wild aspect of human nature that never disappears, no matter how much civilization we accumulate. This collective shadow contains the primitive impulses that our ancestors needed to survive. It contains the capacity for cruelty that was necessary to hunt, to fight, to defend territory. It contains the greed that drove the accumulation of resources. It contains the envy that created competition. It contains the hatred that allowed the destruction of the enemy. It contains the will to power that drove domination. It contains the wild sexuality that ensured reproduction. Everything that civilization tried to domesticate, everything that religion tried to condemn, everything that education tried to repress, exists in the collective shadow, waiting for an opportunity to. And here is something Jung discovered that terrified him. When an entire society denies its collective, when an entire nation rejects its dark, these forces they are not annihilated. They are not transformed into nothing. They emerge in even more destructive forms. They find expression in collective behaviors that no individual would ever commit alone. They manifest in social phenomena that seem to come from nowhere, seem inexplicable, seem impossible to have been caused by rational and civilized people. Jung saw this happen in his time. He saw how Germany, one of the most cultured and refined nations in Europe, a a nation that had produced some of the greatest philosophers, composers, and thinkers in history, fell under the control of dark forces that emerged from collective unconscious. He saw how humanity is capable of unimaginable atrocities when these forces are not recognized and integrated. Jung was in Germany during the rise of Nazism. He personally witnessed how an entire nation could be possessed by a collective shadow. He saw how ordinary people, educated people, people who loved their families, people who went to church on Sundays, could become capable of monstrous acts when these dark forces emerged unchecked. And this experience marked him deeply, because Jung understood that this was not unique. This was not a historical accident. This was a universal manifestation of a fundamental psychological principle. You deny the shadow. You reject it outside yourself. It doesn't disappear. It finds collective expression. It manifests itself through groups, through nations, through social movements that seem to have a will of their own. It seemed to be possessed by a force that transcends the individuals who compose them. But here is the point that Jung rarely fully revealed. A secret that kept him awake at night. He knew that if he fully revealed the truth about the collective shadow, about how it controls nations, civilizations, about how it lives in each of us waiting for an opportunity to emerge, it would cause despair. Because how do you fight against a force that lives within you? How do you combat something you share with all of humanity? How do you defend yourself against an aspect of your own psyche that is ingrained in the psychic DNA of our species? The answer Jung discovered was revolutionary, also disturbing. He discovered that you don't fight the shadow, integrate it. Jung also discovered something that completely transformed his understanding of the shadow. He discovered that the shadow is not only destructive, it is not only malevolent, it is not only that which must be eliminated or repressed even further. The shadow contains not only what is destructive, but also what is vital, what is creative, what is authentic. It contains the anger that allows us to establish healthy boundaries, that allows us to say no when we need to say no, that allows us to defend our values and our needs. It contains the selfishness that allows us to take care of ourselves, that allows us to prioritize our health and wealth, that allows us not to constantly sacrifice our needs for the need. It contains the sexuality that allows us to connect with life, that allows us to experience pleasure, that allows us to relate intimately and deeply with other humans. It contains the primal power that allows us to manifest our will in the world, that allows us to create, that allows us to transform reality according to our vision. Have you ever noticed that the people who seem most virtuous, most holy, most perfect, often have the most dangerous shadows? Have you ever noticed that those who most vehemently condemn certain behaviors are often the ones who secretly wish to commit them? That is the projection of the shadow in action. It's when you deny an aspect of yourself so completely that you see it in everyone around you, not in yourself. And when you do that, when you project your shadow in that way, you lose the power to integrate it. You become trapped in a cycle of denial and condemnation. Never ends. But when you do the opposite work, when you acknowledge your shadow, when you accept it as part of yourself, when you integrate it through consciousness, something extraordinary happens. You become free. You become whole. You become truly human. Carl Jung was not just a psychologist, philosopher of reality. And in his later years, after exploring the depths of the personal unconscious, mapping the archetypes, and integrating his own shadow, Jung found himself increasingly fascinated by a concept that challenged everything Western science believed, a concept that would take him to the limits of scientific knowledge and beyond, a concept he called synchronicity. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't chance. It wasn't luck. It was something much deeper, much more significant, much more disturbing. It was the manifestation of a fundamental connection between the human psyche and the structure of reality itself. And when Jung began to investigate this concept, when he began to gather evidence, when he began to understand its implications, he realized he had discovered something that would ever change how we understand reality. Jung realized that there are moments when seemingly unconnected events align so perfectly, so meaningfully, that they cannot be explained by linear causality. You think of a person, they call you at that exact moment. You dream of something specific, and the next day, it appears in your life unexpectedly. You're in a profound existential dilemma, questioning which path to take, which decision to make. Find exactly the answer you needed. Book you opened, in a conversation you overheard by chance, in an encounter that seemed to be just a coincidence. You are looking for a solution to a problem that has haunted you for months, and you find the exact person who can help you in the exact place, exact moment. For most people, these are coincidences. For most people, it's just luck. But Jung knew it was much more than that. Jung knew that these were evidences of something much deeper, something that materialistic science could not explain, something that challenged the very foundations of how we understand causality. Jung understood that there is a field of consciousness that permeates all of reality, a field that connects all things, a field that transcends space and time, a field through which the human psyche is not isolated, not a closed fortress within a skull, but an aspect of universal reality, a localized expression of a cosmic consciousness that permeates everything. And when you are aligned with this consciousness, when you are in harmony with the archetypal patterns that govern reality, when you integrate your shadow and become more conscious, you begin to experience synchronicities. You begin to live a life that seems magical. In fact, you are operating on a level of reality that transcends linear causality. You are touching the collective unconscious so deeply that external reality begins to respond to your. But how is this possible? How can external reality respond to your? How can events in the physical world align with your thoughts and emotions? These were the questions Jung obsessively investigated, and the answer he found led him to explore territories that no Western scientists had explored before. He studied alchemy, that ancient science that most modern scientists dismiss. He realized that the ancient alchemists weren't just trying to turn lead into gold. They were describing a process of psychic transformation, a process of integrating opposites, a process of raising consciousness. They were using the symbolic language of gold and lead, fire and water to describe processes occurring within the human psyche. And when you understand this symbolic language, learn to read the symbols through which reality communicates with us, you gain access to knowledge that transcends the rationale. Jung also investigated astrology, a practice that modern science had completely rejected. But Jung didn't believe that the planets caused events in people's lives through some mystical gravitational force. Jung believed that astrology was a symbolic system, an archetypal map of the collective unconscious. The planets didn't cause events. The planets were symbols. They were representations of archetypal patterns that operated both within the psyche and in the cosmos. And when you aligned your consciousness with these patterns, when you became aware of the archetypes that were operating at a given moment, you could work with them instead of being worked on by them. You could use this symbolic understanding to navigate life with more wisdom, with more awareness, with more intention. And here is the point that Jung rarely fully revealed. When you truly understand that your consciousness is connected to everything, that your thoughts and emotions have a real impact on the world around, that you are a co-creator of reality, you gain immense responsibility. You can no longer blame chance, fate, or external circumstances. You can no longer say that things simply happen to you. You must acknowledge your active role in creating. You must recognize that every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every psychic pattern you carry is constantly influencing the reality. And this is a truth that few are willing to accept. Because accepting this means accepting that you are responsible. You are not you are a creator. Jung spent his final years investigating these mysteries. He corresponded with quantum physicists, philosophers, and mystics, trying to find a common language, a way to describe this connection between psyche and reality that could be understood by both science and spirituality. Because Jung knew he was touching on something fundamental, something that could revolutionize not only psychology, but our entire understanding of the universe. But he also knew that this truth was dangerous. Because if people truly understood that they are co-creators of reality, if they truly believed that their thoughts and emotions shape the world around them, it would change everything. It would change how we live. It would change how we relate to each other. It would change how we build our society. And so, Jung kept his secrets. But he left clues. He left fragments of truth scattered throughout his writings, hoping that future generations could piece these fragments together and finally understand. Because Jung knew that when you truly understand synchronicity, when you truly understand consciousness is connected to everything, you are on the verge of a discovery that transcends everything you believe to be possible. You're about to understand that reality is much vaster, much more intelligent, much more meaningful than what materialistic science allows us to see. And when you pass through that door, when you truly enter that expanded reality, you finally understand why Jung guarded his secrets so carefully. Because the knowledge that exists on the other side of that door is not just transformative, it is revolutionary. It is capable of forever changing how you live, how you think, how you exist in the world. Carl Jung called individuation the process through which a human being becomes who they truly are. Not who society expects you to be. Not who your parents wanted you to be. Not who your wounds and traumas forced you to be. Not who religion, education, and culture tried to mold you into. But who you truly are in your deepest essence, in your most authentic truth, in your sacred core that remains untouched by all external influence. And Jung understood that this process was not easy, not comfortable, not safe. Because to become who you truly are, you must first die to who you believed yourself to be. You must let go of all the masks you wore. You must abandon all the stories you told yourself. You must renounce all the identities you constructed to adapt to the world. And this is a process of death and rebirth that few are willing to face. Individuation is a process of total integration. It is the path to becoming whole, to uniting all the fragmented parts of your psyche into a coherent and harmonious whole. It is recognizing the hero within you, but also the shadow. It is accepting the sage, but also the trickster who defies norms. It is integrating the lover, but also the warrior. It is accepting the great mother, but also the destroyer. It is integrating everything you have rejected, everything you have denied, everything you have buried in the depths of your unconscious. And when you do this, when you truly do this work of integration, when you face every aspect of yourself with honesty and compassion, something extraordinary happens. You become free. You become authentic. You become capable of living a life that is truly yours, a life that flows from your center, a life that expresses your deepest essence. Jung understood that individuation, not a destination you reach and then stop at. It's not a goal you achieve and are satisfied with. Individuation is a continuous process, a lifelong journey. It's like climbing a sacred mountain. Each step you take, each layer of illusion you remove, each aspect of yourself you integrate, brings you closer to the summit. But the summit is never fully reached, because the true goal is not reaching the summit. The true goal is the process of climbing. It's the transformation that occurs as you climb. It's the continuous death of who you were and the continuous birth of who you are becoming. And each step you take on this journey, each integration you achieve, each shadow you acknowledge, each archetype you consciously embody, makes you more whole, more real, more truly human. But how do you begin this journey? How do you initiate the individuation process in your own life? Jung left clues. He left a map. First, you must begin to observe your patterns. You must begin to notice the situations that repeat themselves in your life, the relationships that begin the same way and end the same way, the conflicts you have with different people that seem to be versions of the same conflict, the fears that appear in different contexts, the desires you obsessively pursue. These patterns are not these are your archetypes in action. These are the primordial patterns that inhabit your collective. Second, you must begin to work with your dreams. Your dreams are messages from the collective unconscious. Dreams are the language through which your deep psyche tries to communicate with you. Start writing down your dreams. Start reflecting on their symbols. Start asking what your dreams are trying to tell you. Third, you must begin to integrate your shadow. You must begin to recognize those parts of yourself that you reject, that you deny, that you project onto others. Ask yourself, what quality that I criticize most in others is actually a quality that I reject in myself? What aspect of myself am I afraid to acknowledge? And here is the secret that Jung guarded most carefully. When you truly individuate, when you truly become who you are, you don't become an isolated, egocentric person focused only on yourself. You become more connected to all of humanity, because when you integrate your own shadow, you become able to see the shadow in others without judgment. When you recognize your own archetypes, you become able to recognize them in others, understand why they act the way. When you understand your own connection to the collective unconscious, you become able to understand that we are all connected, that we all share the same fundamental psychic essence, that we are all expressions of the same universal reality. Individuation is simultaneously the most personal and the most universal act a human being can perform. Because when you truly become yourself, when you become whole, you not only transform your own life, you transform the world around you. Because consciousness is contagious, authenticity is contagious, integration is contagious. And when a person truly individuates, when a person truly becomes who they are, it creates a wave of transformation that extends far beyond that individual person. It touches the collective unconscious. It affects all of humanity. This is the psychic secret that Carl Jung buried in eternal night. This is the knowledge he guarded so carefully that he left it scattered in fragments throughout his writings, hoping that future generations could gather these pieces and finally understand. Now that you know, now that you understand the truth he guarded, the question that remains is profound and urgent. What will you do with knowledge? How will you use this understanding to truly become yourself? How will you use this wisdom to integrate your own shadow, to recognize your own archetypes, to connect with the collective unconscious that flows through you? How will you begin your own journey of individuation? If this video resonated with you, you felt that this truth touched something deep in your soul, something you always knew but had never heard articulated in this way, leave a comment below. Share which part of this journey with Jung touched your heart the most. Share which archetype you recognized in yourself. Share which pattern you finally understood. And if you prefer to keep your comment anonymous, that's fine. The important thing is that you start talking about it, that you start exploring it, that you start integrating it. If you want to explore more about the mysteries of the human psyche, about the secrets that the great masters kept, about the path of individuation and the transformation of consciousness, subscribe to the channel now. Activate notifications so you don't miss any videos about Carl Jung, about about depth psychology, about the development of consciousness, and about the journey to truly becoming yourself. And of course, like this video. Not just because you liked it, but because this gesture helps other people discover these truths that change the course of the history of psychology, and that have the power to transform their lives too. Because the ultimate truth that Carl Jung left us is this: you are not a victim of your unconscious. You are not a puppet of the forces that dwell within you. You are a creator. You are a co-creator of reality. You are a localized expression of a universal consciousness that is constantly evolving, constantly transforming, constantly becoming more self-aware through you. Now on, every decision you make, every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every action you take, be a conscious choice. Welcome to true awakening. Welcome to the journey of individuation. Welcome home. Because Carl Jung was not just a psychologist, he was a guide, an initiator, a maestro who taught us to play the orchestra of our own psyche. And his greatest contribution was not giving us ready-made answers, it's teaching us the right questions that lead us ever deeper into ourselves until we finally discover that within us exists an entire universe, and that this universe is safe.